let's start with Startup Grind. Let's start with Oliver, and I wish you, all of us, a very interesting evening. I'm quite looking forward to the story, and yeah, let's start with that. I enjoy most on this format that I can sit down. It's like the best thing ever. You don't have to stand up. So, Oliver, let's start with something that is not what you're known for. Everybody knows you, SpeedInvest. A couple people maybe knowing what you did before with your selling and the merger and whatever. Let's tell us a bit about your upbringing, what kind of education, where you come from, like a bit of an insight where this Oliver Holle that I guess 95% of the people in this room know where he comes from.
All right. So, hi. So I come from a family of doctors, actually. So I've not really a lot of entrepreneurial blood in my veins, at least in the parents' generation. I didn't know what to do after finishing high school. I had no clue, actually. So I started studying philosophy. It was fun. And I was really interested. I never thought I would become a philosopher. It was clear. But I wanted to. I also studied economics at the WU, at the really terrible WU in Vienna back then, and I had to do something else. So it was this combination of economics and philosophy. And really early on, I started to do projects on the side. And funny enough, Christoph Korher, one of the guys at the Grünen in Wien, he ran a seminar at the WU where we basically were doing computer simulations on economic and ecological problems. So, for example, how would climate change impact Austria, or how would the climate tax change things, or to the better or worse in economic, political, and ecological terms. And that really fascinated me, and we started doing the simulation project, and then actually out of this we formed a small NGO that was called SISIS, Institute for the Simulation of Socio-Economic Systems. Yeah, that was cool. And we got a little project for 20,000 shillings from the Wiener Grünen, and that was my first step into entrepreneurship, and then from then on it never stopped.
So how much of these special simulation systems did you actually build with SISIS?
We did this for quite a while. We started with this in '94, I think, and then we did it for the Deutsche Grünen, and we did it for the Bundesgrünen, and then we finally got a contract from the non-Grünen, from the Landwirtschaftsministerium, and suddenly we had an order for 1 million shillings, and then we had to form a GmbH. So that we were still at university back then, and had no clue about anything internet or anything business, but we formed the GmbH, and then we got this contract, and all my friends became shareholders, and it was really stupid, actually. but we had to form this GmbH because we had this big contract from the ministry, so they didn't want to contract with an NGO, so that's what we did.
So how many people were there? Because it all your friends, like 20, 40?
Well, we were the very special startup where there were a lot more shareholders than people that actually worked. Oh. We had because we came out of this Verein, out of this NGO. So everybody that ever did anything in the NGO or in the Verein also wants to be shareholder, and we never thought this would become anything anyway, so we didn't care. And that was one of the biggest mistakes in my life. So we were 10 shareholders. Yeah. 10 shareholders, 2.5 people really doing something. We all still were finishing our studies, and then we got the next project, and suddenly the first internet, the first web browsers came on, and we had one technical guy in the team, and he said, okay, let's do exactly the same and bring it to the internet, and he built the first Java-based apps that were kind of the same simulations, again super sophisticated games in a way that kind of tried to emulate these complex problems, and we did this on the web. And then the first .com boom came, and things changed completely again.
Yeah, so you went to the US for your studies, I've read somewhere.
Yeah.
So where have you been? And
I went to New York. I got a scholarship for a PhD in economics at Columbia.
that was while doing.
That was while doing CISIS actually. That was exactly while this project for the Landwirtschaftsministerium, and we were, I guess, one of the early distributed virtual organizations, which meant we had a little how do you call it, Halbanschluss, like you had to dial in and get internet, and it was black box. This was this very strange internet protocol to communicate. Well, that's how we went through that project, and then I finished my master, and that was the point that in my life where I had to decide, okay, do I continue to work at university or become an entrepreneur? And I decided to become an entrepreneur and moved back to Vienna in, what was it, 98, 99, something like that. Yeah, and then we actually really started to work on that company.
Because with us you got funding, as far as I remember a talk I've listened to you. How did that come along in that time? It was .com boom, and who were the investors and how did it work out?
Well, it was very different times. Well, in a certain way now it's becoming a little bit bubbly as back then. So we were 3 guys working in a small office and working on those simulations, and there wasn't really not a big plan for that. But we loved what we were doing. It was really driven by content. We loved what we were doing with these games. But we didn't earn any money, so we had to consult on the sidelines. And there was this internet agency that were basically taken over by a couple of German guys who wanted to take this agency and take it to the Neue Markt. That was the IPO place back then, and suddenly there was this big internet boom. Everybody took their companies to the Neue Markt for an IPO, and suddenly this very small, not very interesting internet agency became IPO material back then. But they were all agency guys, had no clue about numbers. So we were doing their business plans for them on the background. So that's how we earned our money to run CISIS. And we looked at that, and we looked at it for half a year. Okay, if these guys can do that, we can do that as well. That's crazy. So it was really not impressive. Anyway, so so we decided to say, okay, if these guys can raise a couple hundred, they raised, I think, almost 100 million euros back then, at the Neue Markt. Totally crazy. And actually went bankrupt 1.5 years later.
Spending 100 million euros in 1.5 years, that's actually an achievement, I would say.
It's really, really, this is totally absurd and really bad, actually. A lot of people, a lot of people had a bad time. Anyway, so we raised, so in 99, 2000, we were one of the few people that already have been working in that space for a number of years, and we didn't build websites, which was interesting because everybody just built websites, we built games. So actually the investors were chasing us. And it was really quite easy. We raised 4 million euros in a couple of weeks. We were still 3 people. We had one employee. And we had a pre-money valuation of 17.5 million euros. And we had 100,000 euros in revenue. That was good.
Pretty nice multiple, I have to say.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So he got like 4 million. I'd like to have 4 million. That's fine. What did you do with that amount of money?
So the first thing we did, we rented a really big office. 5 years contract. No way out of that contract. 1,200 square meter because we needed that space.
3 people.
That was really cool. The next thing I did, I hired all my friends from university. That was also really smart. Everybody, all my good friends. It was really fun. It was great time for short, but great. And then we opened offices in New York, in London, and another really smart move. And we hired really expensive sales guys. It was cool.
What was your product back then?
Well, that was the problem. We were still doing sort of these fun, smart games, and we of course, we had no product whatsoever. We had a couple of cool projects. We had really fun projects. We had this game where you kind of was called what was it? No. Anyway, it was basically a question-answer game where you kind of selected your political opinions, and then it told you what to vote for. I mean, this is all old news nowadays, but back then it was.
Jesus, you were the first Wahlkabine.
We were long before Wahlkabine even started. We did that.
So they're copycats, I can see.
We actually sold that to Time magazine back in the US, and to Guardian, and to a couple of big newspapers, and they actually paid us something, but only until 2001. Then they stopped paying us, because 2001 the big internet bust happened, and all the .com companies went bankrupt. Most of our customers were .com companies, so we were pretty much in a shithole.
So by 2001 there was no revenue?
Well, no revenue is
compared to
pretty
the
little
nice
revenue.
office.
Pretty little revenue. We were 70 people by then, so we hired in less than a year. We hired 70 people, or 65 people, and really spent almost all the money. It was pretty much gone in end of 2001. I'm still totally amazed. I mean, I would never ever invest in somebody like me. It's really stupid. But the interesting thing was our investors were also that stupid. Yeah? They also had no clue. And I mean, if I would be an investor in Sysys back then, I would have killed this guy to rent a 5-year, to sign a 5-year lease of a 1,200 square meter office building. And it's stupid. And to put a couple of $100,000 in renovation in it.
A little extra here.
A little extra here. Yeah, my partner back then, he really loved to do interior designs. It was kind of his dream come true, and it was perfect. But we were all clueless. And then everybody else was clueless as well. I mean, there were a couple of startups in Vienna, maybe 3 other ones, and nobody talked to each other. And everybody was in this combination of cluelessness, no peer group, nobody to talk to, no international benchmarks how to do it, and this whole craziness of you have to grow, you have to build revenue, or not revenue, you have to build traction, whatever that is, and that kind of took us away. And then suddenly the money stopped, and we had to raise additional money, and then the investors thought, okay, now we can take the company away from us, and from the founders. And then the hard times started. So
yeah, the hard times started, and that's actually where this whole series comes from. That you will find in 150 capitals in the world, cities in the world, is called Startup Grind. So maybe you got 70 people on payroll, not that much revenue. So I guess you cut slightly 1 or 2 heads. Maybe you can give some insights in these days.
So I mean, the biggest problem and the hardest thing to do is actually to look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, what you're doing is completely stupid and it's not going to work. And that really took me personally much longer than it should have taken me. So that's why I was the one fighting in the supervisory board. No, we just need 2 more months, then the revenues will come. 2 more months with the sales guy in London, and then he will bring the big deals that he promised us to bring. So I was the one actually waiting the longest to do the necessary steps, because I simply didn't want to accept the hard truth that it's not going to work. But at some point it was a reality that we were running out of money, and the terms that our investors put in front of us for further money were really bad, obviously. And the one thing that actually is very, very different from today is in the first round of investment, when they came in with this 4 million at 17.5 valuation, we were stupid enough to also basically take up a loan personally. So our investors told us, okay, you need to keep your shares in your company. You also need to invest, but it's no problem. We borrow you the money, we give you the money, but you have to just sign the credit loan agreement, and then you don't have to worry about that. And we said, okay, we are rich. We have a company worth 20 million, no problem. So each of us basically having a loan with an Austrian bank of approximately 400,000 or 500,000 euros on a personal, without any kind of security or whatever. So we started to realize that there's this loan out there somewhere.
Little bywork in the contract, or like
little bywork in the contract, and that totally, of course, changed the negotiations, because we couldn't just say, okay, it's not going to work, bye, because we could, but then it would be private bankers. basically. So the first thing we did, we closed the international offices. That was relatively easy because these guys were just ripping us off anyway. I had no bad feelings about that. And then it started to become more and more difficult, and we had to, but at the end of the day, after roughly, so we started this process end of 2001, and I think it was 8 months later, we were 20 people, and all my good friends were gone. And a couple of good friendships were also gone. And we were sitting 20 people in the Vienna office with 1,000 square meters, so 1,200 square meters. And started to look for sub-renting people, like sub-renting partners. And I remember very well, we had this one moment where basically there was this, we were simply not able to pay the rent. And so the whole supervisory board, myself, and 3 people, like the core team, we went 8 people to a landlord and sat in front of him and said, okay, either you let us out of this lease, or we're going to go straight next to the Riemergasse and declare bankruptcy. And this guy fortunately let us out, not completely, but in a way that let us survive. And that was surely a turning point, that we at least were getting out of the most stupid fault lines of this startup life. And then we started to do any kind of work that we got just to survive. Unfortunately enough, the telcos back then, so in 2002, were still awash in cash, and they wanted to do mobile games, and we started to do mobile games for SMS games, WAP games, whatever we could to pay the bills. And that got us along to, so to say, for the next year, but it was a year where there was not 1 month where we didn't have had a big internal fight whether we have to actually declare bankruptcy, because we're completely broke, and and we're personally reliable to, like the year was one step beyond the line of criminal negligence to not declare bankruptcy.
So you basically, now you got a company that was running, kind of, not really like what you expect, but
yeah.
like at least it's
sort of
kind of way. So there was like I've read that you got like a partnership, and that brought you onto the growth path a bit. So maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So one thing that really helped us was that we had this partnership with Ericsson. So fun enough, like we had sizes back in the early 2000s was a kind of a brand that internet people knew of in Austria, because we had all these fun projects, like the Candidator, that was the name, that was the Time magazine project. And so the Ericsson guys from Austria came to our office and said, okay, we actually sold all those UMTS licenses to all the big telcos, and now we need to bring them content, and can you guys help us? So that was the initial conversation, and that was already in 2001. And then we started to work with them, and we started to feed them, we started to write their PowerPoints for their bosses, and then it took us 2.5 years, until 2003 sometimes, when we finally got to a level where Ericsson Global in Stockholm actually started to sell our product, which eventually became a music store, basically iTunes for the mobile phone before the iPhone came out. Basically it became an Ericsson product, but behind this product was our technology and our team, and we suddenly had a sales force that really worked across the globe, and we had installations from Singapore to the US, and suddenly we had a business. And that was a big relief. And that actually was the beginning of the discussions for the merger that then led to 3 United.
Before we come to the merger, about this Ericsson deal, was it like, how did you convince, like, who did you sell it to in the end that it got up? Or did it only grow from the local Austrian office to up there? Or was it like, could you pitch somehow directly to the global board of then Ericsson?
Well, the lucky situation was that there was this very small Austrian, basically it was a key accounting team in Vienna, but they wanted to make a career within Ericsson, and they needed a story. And I needed Ericsson, and I needed business. So what we did as a team is work very, very closely with those Ericsson guys and actually try to make them successful within Ericsson. So it was really just, we were really blind writing their we were basically ghostwriting their emails, we were basically putting together their PowerPoints for their bosses, and they had suddenly, for the first time within Ericsson, a product that would not come out of Sweden or out of Stockholm, that they would push into the organization in Ericsson. And that was their path, their career path was very much depending upon us, and our life was very much depending upon them.
So that was definitely a win-win situation here.
It was a pretty, but it was a very much an uphill battle, because it was if I would ever, anybody, so to say, license an Austrian product when you're in Scandinavia. But it worked. It took us forever. It took us 2.5 years without basically any meaningful revenue from Ericsson, and then step by step it became relevant.
So now you already started to talk about it, like the merger, but now you got like decent revenue. I assume it was decent, you could survive, it was first time probably you could sleep again, but I don't know how it felt like. So the usual Austrian usual Austrian company at that stage would say, that's nice, let's keep it like that. But you decided on a merger, so maybe give us some insights.
Well, it was
who you merged with and what were the reasons behind that.
So, I mean, if you have a situation like that, it's very risky, because if Ericsson at one point politically decides to, well, it's nice, but let's work with that Swedish company or let's work with that US company, you're dead, basically, because it was, so end of 2003, we had 80% of our revenues with Ericsson. It was roughly paying the bills, we were surviving, but it was very clear that this is not a sustainable situation, because you can, again, if they sneeze, we're dead. So that was a problem. At the same time, it was still at a level where the company was very shaky, and my investors, which by then already owned more than half of the company, roughly 60, 70%, whatever, and they already had completely written off the company. We were zero in the books. They didn't even come to the supervisory board meetings anymore. They didn't give shit. They heard something about Ericsson, but who cares? So that was the moment. Okay, so now there was the time to get back the company, right? So
it basically was also about getting more, like getting ownership again and getting being the investors. Nobody ever heard it in here, especially nobody who was financed by SpeedInvest.
No, but it was a situation where I think also if I would be the investor back then, I would have totally be fine with what we did, because it was a situation where there was no. So we still didn't pay us any salary, so we stopped paying us for the last 1.5 years, and we didn't have a lot of shares anymore. So it was clearly not a good situation. So what I did is basically approached my investors and said, okay guys, I pay you, I buy you out, and we took up another little bit of debt from friends and family, and basically friends and family.
Two fools, maybe?
Yeah, there were not many fools doing that for us. But we took another little bit of money from friends, and bought all the investors out. So we had 100% of the company back then again. We had a lot more debt, but it was really didn't make a lot of difference, because if you're broke, you're broke. And that was also the point where we were able to talk to other companies about the merger, because if you have a 70% ownership from a VC who doesn't care, you're not in a position to talk about the merger. And it was pretty clear that for us a merger was a very, very smart move, because we had this one company that basically had most of the revenues, but it was an international company that had a lot of, so to say, brand value. And there were other companies in Austria, 2 of them we found, that had very complementary products, but no international customers and no international network or distribution channels. And that was the motivation to join forces with them and actually build a company that was called 3 United, that actually also had a meaningful revenue number and a meaningful product range that could then really become a European player in the mobile space.
Was trust not an issue? You had investors on board who let you fall at some stage, which might be understandable or not, and then you approached. I don't know how well you knew the other 2 companies and the management. Like it's like a trust thing, because of course you bring value by bringing the international client, and they bring value by having complementary products. But still, it's a big, especially in your situation with the debt that you had, big thing. So was it an issue, or was it simply can't get anywhere anyway?
Well, I mean, the only thing at that point that mattered for me is a little bit more security on the, like, not having a company where I was constantly worried that it would fail. That was first, and the second one, actually having a realistic opportunity to have an exit, because I knew I had this big debt and I wanted to finally pay my rent again, and that seemed to me the best move to do that. So I was very much pushing for that. At the same time, I knew the guys a little bit. One of them was actually a company where we subletted our space.
Okay.
And it made a lot of sense, because together we were roughly in the 4 or 5 million euro revenue dimension, that's where you start to become meaningful as an acquisition target. We knew if we would have another good 1 or 2 years, we could become a 10 million company and 10 million revenue company, and then you're really worth something. So trust was a big issue, but we really went through the merger process very, very fast. We did that in basically 6 weeks, from the first meaningful negotiation or discussion to signing a term sheet, and it was very, very, very tough negotiations, very, very challenging questions, because everybody, of course, wanted to downgrade the other business model. But in the end, we all the three of us had the same carrot in front of us, which was clear that together we would be able to exit our companies, and alone it would be very difficult.
So I guess everybody that has read a bit about you has read about your exit, at least a bit, that you exited to, I would say, it's just pretty well-known company. It's not like one of the smaller ones. At that stage especially, it was really, I can remember that time, it's really one of the big brands, it's still one of the big brands. So maybe give us some insight how that merger, how they came along to you, and other merger, the exit, and how it changed your life.
It did change my life. I could pay back the debt. So we merged in, what was it, in second quarter of 2004. So that was basically 2 years after the big bust. And already at that point, the founding team of the three companies, we were very much in alignment that we want to sell the company. So it was not like this, okay, we merge and then we built this for 10 years. We were very, very pragmatic about it, and it was also not 100% clear that the iPhone would come or that apps would come, but it was pretty clear that this messaging world that we were in wouldn't grow indefinitely in the way that it was growing back then. It wouldn't stay that profitable as it was back then. So we merged with a company called Zidris, which Markus Wagner founded, and one that was called Connovation, which was a mobile ticketing, mobile e-commerce, m-commerce company. And we were doing extremely well. Ericsson was booming like crazy. Mobile messaging was booming, and we had this great year in 2005, where United was basically, we were having a profit of roughly 3.8 million euros in for that year.
How many employees were you at that stage?
Back again 70,
okay.
but this time with profit. So it was so each of the companies were roughly 20 people, and then we grew a little bit on top of that. So it was very healthy, very sustainable, very profitable. Let's put it that way. Sustainable, we had no clue, but we had the feeling that the time is right to go out. And actually through Ericsson, an investment banker in San Francisco approached us who wanted to represent our M&A process. And we convinced him to do M&A to do business development in the US for us. And so we started to work with a couple of US companies, and one of them was a company called Verisign. And Verisign was actually known for .com and .net domains, plus security, so secure browser plugin. And they wanted to move into mobile, and they actually won a contract for the TV show called American Idol. American Idol is this TV show where it was basically like Untitled Superstar, whatever, in the US, and they had very good relationships with AT&T, and they convinced AT&T to give them the contract for the SMS voting of American Idol, but they had no clue whatsoever how to do that. And it was only 3 months away, and they became really nervous. And we did exactly that kind of thing for Austria, for Starmania, I think it was called.
But it's like slightly more
bit bigger, and we had no clue if we would be able to do it, but of course we signed up for it. and American Idol was run, the SMS voting in American Idol was run live out of Salzburg data center, and it worked perfectly. It was really amazing. I mean, these guys were so good. Our engineering team was so good, especially the guys actually from Marcus, the Exceedus guys were really good. And that also opened for me, up until today, that was one of the moments where I started to really believe in Austrian startups, because it was, I mean, we were really kicking their asses in many ways.
It's good to see I was already back then, not that far away, but still not like today where we all talk about startups. So you got this Verisign where you worked with them, and then they approached you, or did you approach them, or like?
No, we had a very, very structured process. So we spent 1.5 years running this BizDev turning into M&A, merger and acquisition process, where we really talked to everybody in the industry, and we were kind of the European poster child, because we were so profitable. All the other guys were not profitable, and we were the only ones who were highly profitable. So it was a very good situation to do an M&A process, and we had roughly 10 companies interested in buying 3United, and that really changed the picture, because if you're starting to run this competitive process, really you can actually dictate the terms. And when we started the process, we were thinking, okay, if we get 20 million, we're cool, we're really cool. And then we got the first term sheet for 30, and we were okay, it's perfect, we will take it. And then fortunately we had this M&A advisor from the US and said, you're not going to take this. So we didn't. And at the end of the day, we narrowed it down to 2 guys, so Verisign and another European company. And then we just did very basic negotiation tactics and moved the price up again. And it turned out to be then 55 million. Which was completely beyond anything what we thought would be possible. All cash, no earnout. It's really good. And yeah, so we closed the deal in February 2006.
Was it part of the deal that you stay because you stayed, but was it part of the deal that you stayed, or was it like you can stay but you don't have to?
Well, it was not. So there was a little bit of, so to say, of an incentive to stay. But for me, I was actually, I always wanted to work in Silicon Valley in a sort of meaningful position, and they offered me to move my family, and like the whole, with dog and cat, we all moved to Santa Cruz, and I worked there for 1.5 years for Verisign, and it was actually a wonderful time, so it made sense for me.
So it was the only time you were really employed? Like? Yes,
it was the only time I was really employed, and for a half year it was really fun. Especially the surfing part. And then it started to suck, because Verisign was a company that was very, very hierarchical, very, very corporate. American corporates, I think, are even worse than Austrian corporates. It all sounds so great, but it's really bad. They very much believe in hierarchies, and if you're a VP, nobody talks to you, basically, because you're a VP. Plus, they started to change, like they acquired us and they acquired 5 other mobile companies, and then they decided to not do mobile anymore. So basically a year into the acquisition, or after the acquisition, they kind of started to divest all those assets again, and so it was not interesting anymore. So a half year later, I left again.
Then you moved back to Austria, I don't know if right away, but yeah, not too far away anyway. Let's say you said you wanted to live in San Francisco, Silicon Valley. You had this great opportunity. There's a diverse startup scene. It was like even then there was like all over the news. You always could read about startups from Silicon Valley. Then you come back to Austria where there is no startup scene. What did you? And it's not as nice weather. Well, I don't know if you're a big skier, maybe it's better here. But what were the reasons that you said? let's go back to Vienna or Austria, whatever?
No good reason other than family, basically. It was
It's a good reason. So.
Yeah, but it was simply the case that we had kids. Like my wife had brought in kids into the marriage, and they wanted to move back. It was always a deal that 2 years we would move back.
That worked out quite well with Verisign. Yeah. So you moved back and you started the merger, as far as I know, because that was the first time I saw your face somewhere. There was the merger. It wasn't in startups any at all. So I didn't read further. I saw you somewhere, and then I didn't know what the merger was doing and what was the difference between the merger and now SpeedInvest and how it developed this way. So maybe you can give us a bit of insight how you developed in these areas.
Well, honestly, we didn't know what the merger would do also.
Okay.
The idea was that I had this great team of people that I love to work with at United and then at Verisign. And the truth is we wanted to do a management buyout. So we wanted to buy back the company when we heard there was this divesting going on. And that didn't work out because for many reasons. First of all, we didn't want to pay any money. Verisign wanted to have money, so unfortunately they didn't give it to us for free. But we knew we wanted to stay together and actually work together on the next thing, but we were not really clear what this next thing would be. So, and that was the first hypothesis. The second hypothesis was, okay, this whole merger thing actually worked quite well. And so we called the company The Merger and started to work on the one hand with startups, and on the other hand started to do a little bit of consulting work to earn some money. Plus I convinced one of the guys that worked at Verisign for me, that was Eric Bovey. He was the best product guy that I found there. And I convinced him to also leave Verisign. And so we had a US office. He was our US guy. So the obvious thing to do was to work with startups that wanted to launch in the US. And then we found a company called Wikitude. I don't know if you guys know Wikitude. It's this augmented reality startup. And we worked with them and actually got founder shares to work with them. So we tried to raise money for them in the US, and we built business relationships with them in the US. And that was the first time where we started to, so to say, work with other startups in the sense that we're still working today, but without any capital. We didn't invest. We didn't have any capital other than the money we had ourselves. So we put a little bit of capital, but not what was sufficient. For example, for Wikitude. We also worked with Untitled and a couple of the other early startups back then, and that was a lot of fun. The consulting piece was terrible, and we were really bad at it, and we didn't. It was clear. Okay, let's leave the consulting bit and focus on the startup part.
So when did the idea come up about SpeedInvest, about funds that invest into startups, like getting money from somebody else to invest in startups?
It was a very logical thing. It was so the merger didn't work. The merger was this combination of business angels plus working with startups for equity plus consulting, and the consulting piece was depressing for everybody, and the startup work was fun and was actually rewarding because we were able to add value, but it was also very frustrating because all these companies needed more money than we could give them, and there were no business angels in 2007, 2008 in Austria, very few. So the one piece didn't work because there was too little capital, and the other piece was depressing. So we needed to change something, and so we said, okay, either we do something completely different, or we're able to raise a fund. And then we started to read how to do a fund, read some blogs. And I never bought a book about a fund, but maybe there are books. But what we did is we just did a PowerPoint presentation and started to talk to people. And
take the PowerPoint, I can see that. That's like one thing going on through your
you have to push it your way up.
So you got this fund together, and so tell me what's SpeedInvest, what is your probably I've read a lot about it, but now I've got a picture, but maybe you can give some points. What is your focus? What are you adding? Where are you adding value? Are you purely a financial investor? What is SpeedInvest for everybody who's not that familiar?
Well, I think having heard that story, so to say, from what we've been doing as a team and my background, it was clear that So I was very clear that I didn't want to start my own specific product company anymore. I wanted to do something more broad, and obviously the sizes told me that my product ideas are not the best. So on the other hand, we were able to add value, and the idea was to work with startups, help them with the experiences we had, help them with the network that we have, and provide capital, because just the network and just the experience doesn't help if you don't put in a couple 100,000. And that is up to the day the same concept for SpeedInvest, that we put in money, more money than one single business angel typically can do. Plus we work with the team on very specific tasks that are hard for first-time founders to do.
I lost my thoughts, so that's great. So probably a lot of people have read in the last week. What was it? Tuesday? When did it? When was it?
Yeah.
Tuesday. You did like a second fund, SpeedInvest 2. It's always good to have sequel. So what's and it's not going to be you alone in terms of the already established SpeedInvest team, but a couple of other people. So you can give us some thoughts about where do you think? Oh, why? I already think I know why you did that. Why you did that? But also, which direction you think you will be going, the market will be going, what do you think is coming up in the future, maybe some industry insights as you see that's as startups is now a common topic, also in Austrian news, even more in standard news as well. The financing side, how is that developing apart from SpeedInvest 2?
It's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so SpeedInvest 2, I mean, first of all, it's again a PowerPoint. It's not done yet. We're basically starting to fundraise for it, and this was basically our propaganda to get investors excited. The thing is, SpeedInvest 1 actually looks really good in terms of performance. It's I didn't expect it, to be honest. When we started with SpeedInvest 1, we had no clue if this would work, and it was like everybody who ever did venture capital in Austria always failed. There's not one fund that actually even returned the money so far in Austria, and so there was not really a lot of good signs to do that. But it really looks pretty amazing. I mean, the companies that we invested in are doing extremely well, from Spock to Wikifolio to Wikidute. We exited already. It's amazing actually, and this gives us now the opportunity to do something that has never happened before, which means is actually raising a fund that is also possible to do A rounds in Austria. It was always extremely frustrating. So in Austria, you're able to get seed rounds done, you're able to get business angels, you're able to get SpeedInvest, put in a couple 100,000, but then you're done. You have to either, so to say, balance your business to not need need millions of euros, or you have to find investors in Germany or UK or in the US. And then basically SpeedInvest 2 is we're trying to finally, because it's absurd that Austria doesn't have that, to bring a meaningfully sized fund to Vienna.
Stop you in the middle of the sentence because there was more questions, but you already brought it up. There's like over the last years, when I was more and more interested in this area before we started our company, you always heard of a lot of great companies, great product ideas, first traction, and then everybody moved to Berlin, basically, most of them. So maybe you can give us some insights on the old topic, Berlin versus Vienna. If you don't want to, no worries.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not that interesting. I think it's a lot of people who moved to Berlin moved back again. Okay. It's really if you're not well connected anywhere, you can stay in Berlin, you can stay in London. It doesn't matter. You're still not going to get money, and that happened to a lot of people. And I think it's the location is extremely overrated at the end of the day. The fact is that if you're looking for money, it's personal network, is some sort of social reputation, trust that you need to bring along in some ways. And of course that's easier if you work in the same office, if you go for lunch with people. And that's the home advantage that companies in Berlin have or in London have. But moving there as an Austrian doesn't necessarily help. It's because you're still an outsider, unfortunately.
So with SpeedInvest 2, you were going to be competing a piece with the, let's say, bigger venture scene in Berlin? Because I guess you're gonna probably be focusing on Austria, but maybe around, and I don't know what your strategies are. Could tell us. It would be interesting for our funding in the future for everybody in here. If you tell us exactly what you want. So you're going to compete with that. And also the question that I already raised is, how is the site developing here in Vienna? It's like you're now starting to raise SpeedInvest 2. Here more and more is like angels. I've seen a couple of angels around that are not from the business. And then there's also the, of course, all over topic of bubble, especially in the US, but maybe also here. So I don't know.
Okay. So are we competing with bigger funds? We hope so. We hope so. We want to compete, and we want to win, and we want to be not known as the Austrian fund. That's completely uninteresting. And we also, SpeedInvest 1 already has invested in Turkey and in Finland and in Slovenia and in Germany. And SpeedInvest 2 will also invest to a large degree abroad, not in Austria. But, of course, we will continue to invest heavily in Austria. But we don't want to be the Austrian dudes. That's not what we want to be. And in terms and scene, and I think we did this press release a couple of days ago that we are working very closely together with pioneers, and I think that's a big opportunity. And with Hansi Hansmann. So nobody has ever built a big fund in Austria. Why? Because there are no investors in Austria who know how to invest in a fund. So you need to put all the forces together, and you need every single little bit of credibility you have together to actually achieve that, and that's exactly the thing what we try to do. And on top of that we're hopefully able to raise this 50 million plus fund. With Pioneers, we think we have a partner that can help us to really go one step earlier. We feel that it's very hard in Austria if you're still at the prototype level or at the pre-seed level. There are very few qualified investors. There's no really good accelerator in Austria. There's not a lot of offer outside fund subsidies and a couple of more or less qualified business angels. So that's exactly what we want to do with Pioneers, to actually go one step earlier.
Who's going to be at Pioneers? Not more. Yeah, I was wondering as well.
Yeah. Go.
It was great last year, I can tell you that. We met a couple of very interesting people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess our major talking time is over. I don't know if you want to add anything to like the outview of Vienna's location before we go over into short question answer round. There was one guy already raised his hand before, so I don't know if you want to add anything to what you think.
I think the Austrian startup scene is really really doing well. I mean, that's everybody says that, but the one thing that I can judge if I look at Hansi Hansmann's portfolio and our portfolio, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing how many companies get follow-on financing, how many companies get interest from US investors, from UK investors. So it's not just bubble-ish. It's really these companies are really doing well. And what we now need is a bit of broader scene and more. I think we simply need more quantity. At the end of the day, quantity brings quality, and we are seeing our deal flow is pretty much steady, slightly increasing over the years, but it's not exploding at all. So.
I hope our people in here can help you with your deal flow. Yeah, let's go to the questions and answer sessions. Only to let you know, I'll repeat each question so that we've got it on video. So, got like the first question was here already.
Yeah, I wanted to ask previously how old you were back then when you did the merger.
The question of the age at the merger.
The age of the merger. So that was in 2004. I was 34.
You can try to stalk him like I did for preparing here, and you'll find a very interesting video on YouTube in San Francisco with Jan Andres and a couple of other guys. That's actually quite interesting about you talking about mergers. Only so that people look a bit younger. So no offense.
Well, that's irrelevant.
Yes.
So, how much did you buy back your company at the time where your investors didn't expect anything?
So the question was, how much was the value? How much did you pay for getting 100% ownership again in the company then?
I think it was roughly 200,000.
Any other questions?
How did you calculate it? I mean, the 200,000. What I understood it's 70%, but how did you actually approach the investor?
I thought very hard, like what is the lowest number that I can go in and not completely offend them and get kicked out.
Question of the valuation at that stage, yeah? There was another one? Another question.
The idea was to give them something positive because they had written it up down to zero, and not something completely meaningless. So that was kind of the idea. But there was no valuation discussion.
It was simply an offer.
It was an offer.
Yeah.
Plus, it was an extortion actually.
It's actually a similar question. How did you actually convince them for the buyout? They didn't see any value in the company, so you actually...
They had no choice. They had no choice because we told them if they don't do it, we leave.
The reason, like the conviction, the argument for the buyout.
But it has to be a credible threat, right? Yeah. You need to. You can't just say that. If you need to really believe it, and if you look at the economics of our situation back then, it was very credible.
But would you have left?
Would you have left?
Who knows?
Any other questions regarding SpeedInvest 2? Anything else you want to know?
Yes, I would like to ask something. As far as I understood, SpeedInvest 2 has much more money to give in order to help startups. So compared to SpeedInvest number 1, what are the different criteria? Would you like to see some companies that have already real customers? Or what is the major difference between both funds?
The major difference between SpeedInvest 1 and 2?
Well, SpeedInvest 2, if we are able to collect the 50 million that we're looking for, will actually be broader in focus. SpeedInvest 1 only had one entry point, which was exactly at seed stage, and we were very specifically looking for companies that we could bring to the US because we have the small office in Silicon Valley, and that was the main area of focus for us. With SpeedInvest 2, we have more touch points. You can actually approach us with pre-seed companies because we have this partnership with Pioneers where people can come in and we invest 50,000 or 70,000 or 30,000. But you can also approach us if you're already post-seed, and because we are able to do Series A rounds, so at least co-invest in Series A rounds. So in terms of stage, we will be more open, which I think is important given where we are in the region. In terms of topics, we will still have this US bridge, which will be a differentiator against other funds, and that will still be a main topic. But we have already in SpeedInvest 1, we've been quite opportunistic. We've invested in Spock, we have invested in a lot of fintech projects, we have invested in Koch, our little projects where we felt that the founders are really great and they know what they're doing, then we will do it. We're not limited to a specific sector.
The huge amount of all money that is available in Invest 2 was 50 millions, and how much was it in the first one, in the SpeedInvest? 10. Oh, okay.
Good. Jörg?
What is the average investment for a startup?
Average investment
company?
Well, in the pre-seed program that we will do together with Pioneers, it's roughly 50 to 100. And in the seed stage, which is still our core, so that's what we have been doing and we will continue to do as the core focus of SpeedInvest, it will be roughly 400,000, plus minus, depends on the needs of the company.
There was some question over here.
When you're investing, is it just gut feeling or?
Yeah, it's just gut feeling.
So you don't have any factors?
No, we fuck it.
The most important thing is you get a decent office. That's what I understood.
What is the role of pioneers in these early stage investments?
So the idea is that we will set up a program and that will allow us to do this. We call it currently micro tickets. We will find a better term for it, but these small investments across Europe with Pioneers Unplugged and Pioneers Festival as the flagship event, and Pioneers will actually run this program. Of course, we will still decide together who will get these small tickets, but we as SpeedInvest, as the partners at SpeedInvest, will continue to focus on the seed stage startups where we can actually deploy where we work with them, but that is a very narrow focus, and we can only do a few of them a year. And this pre-seed program will be much broader. We will do 10 or maybe 15 investments a year, and that will and pioneers will actually be the main, so to say, interface for this program.
There was one more question. I think that's the last question because we have to finish up because the pizzas should be here in 1 minute. So there's a lot of questions more, but I think you were last.
That was actually.
That was your question, so we can take that question.
Where do you get your investors from? Are they basically from Austria, from Germany, from UK, or all over Europe?
So the question is, where is the limited partners of the fund? So it's SpeedInvest 1 and probably where you want to get it for SpeedInvest 2.
SpeedInvest 1 was mainly Austrian private investors. We were a first-time fund and we had no whatsoever track record on the investment side, so we were only getting people who knew us. So it was a couple of media companies that wanted to be a bit closer to the internet. SpeedInvest 2 will be a broader combination from maybe, hopefully, we get a couple of banks to invest. They're starting to, with this whole fintech boom, they're starting to move back into venture. And of course, and again, a lot of private private Stiftungen, endowments, family offices.
Okay, so let's give Oliver a big round of applause for his.
Ja, das ist ja gerade so. Das ist immer so die Zeit zwischen 5 und 7 Stunden, das auch in Wirklichkeit. Was